Have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and, without saying a word, seem to command a kind of quiet respect? It isn't about being the loudest or the most charming. It's something quieter, deeper, almost magnetic. This isn't a modern-day charisma trick or a hidden talent reserved for a select few. In fact, it's an ancient art, one that the Stoics mastered over 2,000 years ago. They understood something profound about presence. Real influence doesn't come from what you do or say, but from who you are when you're fully rooted in yourself. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most reflective leaders, put it beautifully when he wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." He wasn't just talking about private reflection, he was pointing toward an unwritten law of human interaction. A tranquil mind doesn't just serve you inwardly, it radiates outward, affecting how others see you, trust you, and engage with you. This idea that presence is an inside-out practice stands at the heart of Stoic philosophy. It's not about performance, it's about alignment between your values, your mind, and your moment-to-moment awareness. And while much has been written about confidence and influence, there are certain principles unspoken, often overlooked, that the most grounded and influential people live by. These aren't shortcuts or life hacks. They're disciplines, ways of thinking, seeing, and being that have been tested across centuries, in courts and battlefields, in negotiations and quiet conversations. They form what you might call the unwritten laws of presence, and they're as relevant in a boardroom today as they were in the Roman Forum. In this video, we're going to explore 20 of these laws, each one rooted in Stoic thought, each one practical enough to apply starting now. We'll look at how you can master your inner world to better show up in your outer one, how you can listen, speak, and carry yourself with a kind of weight that has nothing to do with title or status, and everything to do with self-mastery. This isn't about changing who you are, it's about returning to who you are calm, clear, and completely present. So if you've ever wondered how to hold space without straining, how to lead without forcing, or how to influence without imposing, you're in the right place. Let's begin. The most influential people don't just speak well, they think well. This is the foundation of presence, and it all starts within the quiet theater of your own mind. Long before you utter a word or make an impression on anyone else, you are in a constant conversation with yourself. This inner dialogue, this running commentary on your experiences, is what the Stoics believed was the very seat of your power and peace. Epictetus, a philosopher who began his life in slavery and became one of the most revered teachers of his time, put it bluntly, "We are disturbed not by things, but by the views which we take of them." That single idea changes everything. It means the world doesn't shape your reality. Your judgments about the world do. Your inner narrative is the lens through which you see everything. And if that lens is clouded with fear, self-doubt, or reactivity, that is what you will project outwards, no matter how hard you try to appear confident. Mastering this internal space was a non-negotiable practice for the Stoics. They called it Prosochē attentiveness, a vigilant awareness of your impressions and judgments as they arise. Epictetus advised his students to catch these initial impressions and hold them at a distance, to say to a troubling thought, "Wait, let me see who you are and what you represent." This isn't about suppressing thoughts, it's about examining them with the calm curiosity of a scientist. Is this judgment true? Is it helpful? Is it within my control? By interrogating your inner dialogue, you stop being a passenger swept along by a torrent of mental noise and become the pilot. You choose which thoughts to engage with and which to let pass by. This is the core of self-mastery. When your internal world is orderly and reasoned, your external presence becomes grounded and unshakable. You are no longer easily offended, quickly flustered, or desperately seeking approval because you've already secured the only approval that matters, your own rational assent. We see this practice embodied powerfully in the life of Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome. Despite unimaginable pressure and responsibility, he consistently turned inward to cultivate his clarity. His personal journal, now known as Meditations, wasn't written for publication. It was his private training ground. In its pages, we see him constantly refining his inner dialogue. He rehearses virtues, questions his own anger, and reminds himself of his purpose. He wasn't born serene. He built serenity thought by thought. For instance, he might have encountered a frustrating person and felt a flash of irritation. Instead of letting that irritation dictate his action, he would pause and write a reminder to himself. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This wasn't cynicism. It was a preemptive reframing of his expectations to protect his own peace. By preparing his mind, he ensured his response would be deliberate rather than destructive. Think about your own experience for a moment. Can you recall a situation where your inner critic took over? Perhaps before an important meeting, that voice whispered that you weren't prepared or that you might say something foolish. Maybe during a conversation, you were so preoccupied with crafting the perfect response that you stopped listening entirely. That internal noise doesn't just stay inside, it leaks out. It shows up as nervous energy, a lack of eye contact, or a defensive tone. It fractures your presence because you are only half there. The other half is lost in a private battle with yourself. Now consider the Stoic alternative. Instead of believing the critical thought, you would simply notice it. You'd acknowledge, there's the thought that I might fail, and then you'd gently question it. Is this thought based on fact or fear? What is within my control right now? I can prepare thoroughly and speak with intention. The outcome itself is not mine to command. This subtle shift from being identified with your thoughts to simply observing them creates a profound space for calm and authenticity to emerge. When was the last time you were truly where you are? Not just physically in a room, but mentally and emotionally immersed in the moment, free from the pull of past regrets or future anxieties. This kind of deep, undivided attention is more than a mindfulness technique. It's a profound source of personal power and influence. The Stoics recognized that a mind scattered across time is a weakened mind. It cannot command respect because it isn't fully there to receive it. Seneca, in his letters, lamented how we are often our own worst thieves, constantly robbing ourselves of the only time we ever truly possess the present. He wrote, "It is not that we have so little time, but that we lose so much. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested." That last phrase is the key. A life well invested is a life where attention is paid fully to the task, the conversation, the moment at hand. It's the difference between merely spending time and actually investing it in something meaningful. This philosophy is a radical antidote to the distractedness that defines modern life. How often are you in a meeting but also mentally drafting an email? Having dinner with family but scrolling through notifications on your phone? This division of attention doesn't just make us less efficient, it makes us less real to the people around us. Presence is a form of respect. When you give someone your complete focus, you are silently communicating that they matter, that this interaction matters. This isn't passive, it's an active and disciplined practice of continually guiding your attention back from its wanderings and anchoring it in the current reality. The Stoics weren't against planning for the future or learning from the past. They were against letting those temporal realms colonize the present moment to the point where you are no longer living your own life. They advocated for a focused engagement with the here and now because that is the only arena where you can actually take effective action. You cannot change yesterday's mistake in this moment, but you can choose a better response right now. You cannot control tomorrow's outcome, but you can execute today's duty with excellence. Consider a Stoic facing a genuine crisis, perhaps a sudden financial loss or a personal rejection. The untrained mind might spiral into panic, catastrophizing about a bleak future, replaying past decisions with regret, and essentially abandoning the present moment entirely. But a mind trained in Stoic presence would do the opposite. It would firmly ground itself in the current reality, what is actually happening right now. What are the facts of the situation stripped of emotional interpretation? What is the very next smallest step that can be taken? This isn't repression, it's supreme focus. By pouring all of their energy into dealing with the present moment, they avoid the exhausting and useless drain of energy into things that are outside of their current control. This composed, focused response in the face of adversity is incredibly influential. It radiates a sense of capability and trustworthiness that chaotic reactivity never can. People are instinctively drawn to those who remain unshaken, not because they are indifferent, but because they are fully engaged with what is actually happening. Now bring this into your own world. Think about the constant stream of distractions vying for your attention. The pings from your devices, the mental to-do lists, the background worry about things that haven't happened yet. Each one is a tiny fracture in your presence. The challenge isn't to eliminate all distraction, that's likely impossible. The practice is to consciously choose one and remove its power over you. Perhaps it's the habit of checking your phone first thing in the morning, which immediately scatters your focus before the day has even begun. Maybe it's allowing your mind to rehearse arguments during a conversation instead of genuinely listening. Identify one single daily distraction that you feel consistently pulls you away from being fully present. What would happen if for 1 week you made a deliberate choice to eliminate that one thing? If your distraction is the phone in the morning, could it charge in another room, allowing you the first 20 minutes of your day in quiet reflection? This isn't about grand gestures, it's about a small, intentional act of reclaiming your attention. By surgically removing one source of fragmentation, you strengthen your ability to fully inhabit your moments, and in doing so, you begin to cultivate a presence that others can't help but notice and respect. Influential people often speak less, but when they do, every word carries a weight that resonates deeply. This isn't about being quiet out of shyness or uncertainty. It's a deliberate and powerful choice. The Stoics held this practice of intentional silence in the highest regard, seeing it not as an absence of communication, but as a profound form of it. In a world that constantly encourages us to fill the air with our opinions, to assert our presence through sound, the choice to remain silent can feel counterintuitive. Yet it is in that quiet space that true authority is often built. Marcus Aurelius, in his private writings, constantly reminded himself of this discipline. He advised, be silent for the most part, or if you speak, say only what is necessary and in a few words. This wasn't a suggestion toward meekness, it was a strategy for impact. By withholding unnecessary speech, you prevent your energy from being diluted across trivialities. You conserve your attention and your power, ensuring that when you do choose to speak, people lean in to listen because they know your words have been considered and are therefore valuable. This practice is deeply intertwined with the Stoic virtue of listening. When you are not preoccupied with formulating your next point, you create mental space to truly hear what another person is saying, not just their words, but the meaning and emotion behind them. This active, silent listening is a gift of presence that few people offer. It signals respect, empathy, and a genuine interest in understanding. The person speaking feels seen and valued, which in turn builds trust and rapport far more effectively than any interrupting agreement or quick advice ever could. Stoicism teaches us to manage our impressions, and one of the most powerful impressions you can make is that of a calm, collected individual who isn't desperate to be heard but is instead committed to understanding. This shifts the dynamic of any interaction. You are no longer just another voice in the chorus. You become the conductor, guiding the conversation through your attentive silence and purposeful contributions. Consider a common scenario where this law comes to life. A heated team meeting where two colleagues are locked in a disagreement. Voices are raised, tempers are flaring, and the conversation is going in circles as each person defends their position more vigorously. Now imagine a third person in that room who chooses a different path. Instead of adding to the noise or trying to force a solution, they simply listen. They absorb the arguments, the frustrations, and the underlying concerns without interruption. Their silence is not passive, it is observant and patient. Then, in a natural pause, they speak. Their voice is calm, their words are few, and they reflect back the core of the issue they heard from both sides. This act of intentional silence followed by measured speech does several things at once. It de-escalates the emotional charge in the room because calm is contagious. It makes the conflicting parties feel heard, which often dissolves defensiveness, and it positions the silent listener not as another combatant, but as a thoughtful mediator whose perspective carries immense weight. Their influence grows not because they shouted the loudest, but because they demonstrated the strength to listen first. Now turn this lens on your own interactions. Bring to mind a recent conversation, perhaps a discussion that became a debate or a moment where you felt a strong urge to interject with your own story or opinion. Play it back. Were there moments where your speaking was more about asserting your presence than adding real value? Could there have been pockets of silence that, had you embraced them, might have created more space for understanding or reflection? The goal of this reflection isn't self-criticism, it's heightened awareness. We often fear that silence will be interpreted as ignorance or disinterest, so we rush to fill it. But the Stoic practice invites us to reframe that fear. See silence not as an empty void, but as a fertile ground for better thinking and deeper connection. What if, in your very next conversation, you made a conscious effort to speak 1/3 less than you normally would, to pause for a full 2 seconds after someone finishes speaking before you respond? This small, intentional practice can dramatically alter the quality of your communication and the perception of your presence. It allows your words to emerge from a place of thoughtfulness rather than impulse, ensuring they land with the impact and influence they deserve. Emotional storms never built lasting influence. While passion and intensity can be captivating in the short term, they are unpredictable and ultimately erode trust. True magnetic presence is built on a foundation of emotional equanimity, a steady, unshakable composure that remains firm even when everything around you is in chaos. This isn't about being emotionless or robotic. It's about achieving a state of inner stability where your reactions are chosen, not triggered. The Stoics framed this as the most fundamental distinction we can make, the difference between an event itself and our judgment of that event. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood true powerlessness, drove this point home with stunning clarity. He taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This single idea is the bedrock of emotional resilience. An external event, a critical comment, a missed deadline, a sudden setback, is just a fact. It is neutral until our mind assigns it a value. We label it as catastrophic, unfair, or humiliating, and it is that label, not the event itself, that sparks the emotional firestorm. The person who cultivates equanimity has simply mastered the art of pausing between the event and the label, creating a space where a rational, intentional response can be chosen. This practice was the secret weapon of history's most influential Stoics. Consider Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his unbending integrity. His life was a series of political crises and personal attacks, yet his contemporaries wrote about his almost supernatural calm under pressure. During a contentious trial where he was being publicly slandered, his opponents threw a written note at his feet, hoping to provoke him into a reaction that would incriminate him. Instead of snatching it up in anger or curiosity, Cato simply refused to even acknowledge it. He continued speaking, his demeanor unchanged, as if nothing had happened. This wasn't ignorance, it was supreme control. By refusing to be baited, he not only maintained his dignity, but also exposed the cheap tactics of his adversaries. His composure in that moment was a louder statement than any angry retort could ever be. It radiated a confidence that said, "Your attempts to disturb me are beneath my notice, and therefore beneath me." This kind of self-possession is incredibly persuasive because it signals that a person is governed by principle, not by impulse. People instinctively trust those who are not easily knocked off balance. Now translate this ancient principle into a modern context. Imagine you're leading a project and you've just received an email from a key client. They're furious, their message is filled with capitalized words and exclamation points, and they're threatening to take their business elsewhere. The initial, untrained reaction is visceral. Your heart rate spikes, your face flushes, and a wave of panic or defensive anger washes over you. The impulsive response is to fire back an email just as heated, to immediately defend your work and your team. But what does that achieve? It meets emotion with emotion, pouring fuel on the fire and almost guaranteeing a damaged relationship. Now apply the Stoic pause. The event is the email. Your initial judgment is that this is a disaster. But is it? Or is it simply a message conveying a person's frustration? By separating the two, you create that crucial space. You can close the laptop, take a walk, and allow the physiological reaction to subside. You can then choose a response rooted not in emotion, but in strategy and virtue. Perhaps that response is a phone call where you lead with listening, acknowledging their frustration without accepting blame prematurely. This calm, collected approach doesn't just solve the problem more effectively, it fundamentally changes how you are perceived. You become the calm in the client's storm, the person they can rely on even when they themselves are losing their composure. Think back to a recent stressful situation in your own life. It might have been a difficult conversation, a looming deadline, or an unexpected piece of bad news. Recall the physical and emotional sensations that arose. How did your reaction in that moment shape the outcome? Did anxiety lead to hasty decisions? Did anger create unnecessary conflict? Now, reimagine that same scenario through the lens of Stoic equanimity. What if, in that critical moment, you had remembered Epictetus's distinction? What if you had consciously labeled the event as merely an event and seen your emotional surge as a natural but manageable reaction? What different choice might you have made? Perhaps you would have taken 10 deep breaths before responding to a text. Maybe you would have asked for a 15-minute recess in a meeting to collect your thoughts. This isn't about rewinding the past, but about training for the future. Each time we practice this pause, we strengthen our ability to respond from a place of centered strength rather than reactive fear. building a presence that others can't help but admire and trust. Seeking external validation is like building your house on sand. It might look impressive for a moment, but the first storm will wash it away. True, unshakable presence is built on the bedrock of virtue, on acting from a place of internal integrity rather than a desperate hunger for external approval. This is perhaps one of the most challenging yet transformative of the Stoic laws, because it asks us to shift the entire source of our motivation. Are you making choices because they are right or because they will make you look good? The Stoics argued that the former leads to freedom and influence, while the latter leads to a life of anxiety and slavery to other people's opinions. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man in the world during his reign, constantly wrestled with this very temptation. In the private pages of his journal, he drilled this principle into his own mind, writing, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." He recognized this as a fundamental paradox of the human condition. We are so quick to prioritize our own comfort and desires, yet we hand over the reins of our self-worth to the fleeting and often fickle judgments of others. This prioritization of moral character over popularity required a radical redefinition of what success actually means. For the Stoic, a successful action is not one that is met with applause, but one that is undertaken with excellence of character, with wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline. The outcome is secondary. This is what it means to lead with virtue. Your compass is your own moral code, not the shifting winds of public opinion. When your actions are aligned with this internal compass, your presence carries a unique weight. There is no hesitation, no need to constantly glance around to see if people are approving. You are grounded in the certainty that you are doing what you believe to be right, and this self-assurance is palpable. People may not always agree with you, but they will respect the consistency and conviction with which you operate. This kind of respect is far more durable and meaningful than the cheap currency of likes and compliments, which can be withdrawn as quickly as they are given. Consider two different approaches to a common professional dilemma. A team leader is faced with a decision that will impact their department. One path is easier, more popular with the majority of the team, and will likely earn the leader immediate praise for being a people person. However, it compromises a core value of fairness and potentially sets a problematic precedent. The other path is more difficult, requires having a tough conversation, and might initially be met with grumbling and resistance. But it is the fair, principled, and ultimately more sustainable choice. The leader seeking validation will instinctively choose the first path. The immediate reward of being liked is too tempting. The leader guided by virtue will choose the second. They are willing to endure short-term disapproval because their self-worth is not tied to being perceived as agreeable. It is tied to acting with justice. In the long run, the virtue-driven leader builds a reputation for integrity that attracts trust and loyalty. The validation-seeking leader's influence remains fragile, constantly dependent on the next popular decision. Now bring this lens to your own life. Think about a choice you made recently. It doesn't have to be a monumental decision. Even small, daily choices reveal our motivations. It could be something as simple as what you posted on social media, what you said in a meeting, or how you spent your free time. Ask yourself with honest curiosity, what was the driving force behind that action? Was it primarily guided by an internal sense of what was good, right, or meaningful? Or was it subtly, or not so subtly, shaped by a desire for recognition, to be seen in a certain light, or to avoid someone's disapproval? This isn't an exercise in self-judgment, it's an exercise in self-awareness. We all have these mixed motives. The practice is to simply notice them without criticism. and in that noticing, create a little more space to choose differently next time. By consistently aligning our smallest actions with virtue rather than validation, we slowly rebuild our presence from the inside out until it becomes a force that is not easily swayed and impossible to ignore. How often does the nagging worry about an outcome pull you out of the moment, fracturing your focus and filling your mind with anxious what-ifs? This constant preoccupation with results is one of the greatest thieves of our presence, and the Stoics offered a powerful antidote, a profound shift in focus from what we cannot command to what we can. Epictetus, with his characteristic clarity, laid out the entire philosophy in a single, transformative distinction. He said, "Some things are within our power while others are not." Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. The result of any endeavor, whether someone likes us, if we get the promotion, if we win the game, falls squarely into that second category. It is not of our own doing. It is influenced by countless external factors, other people's decisions, luck, timing, and unforeseen events. To tie our peace of mind and our sense of self-worth to these externals is to build our emotional home on a foundation of quicksand. The Stoic alternative is not apathy or a lack of ambition. It is the opposite. It is about investing all of your passion, energy, and excellence into the one thing you truly own, your own effort. Your preparation, your attitude, your integrity in the process, your commitment to doing the work as well as you possibly can. These are the actions that are within your power. This is where your attention belongs. When you pour yourself completely into the quality of your actions, a remarkable thing happens. The anxiety about the outcome begins to dissolve because you have redirected your energy to a domain where you have agency. You are no longer a passive victim waiting for a verdict from the universe. You are an active participant, fully engaged in the act of creation itself. This is the essence of detachment, not a cold withdrawal, but a warm, wholehearted immersion in the process. Your presence becomes unwavering because your mind is not split between the present action and a future possibility. It is entirely consumed by the excellence of the current task. We can see this principle in action in the world of elite athletics. Consider a professional tennis player in the final of a major tournament. If their mind is fixated on the outcome, the trophy, the prize money, the glory, the fear of failure, their performance will almost certainly suffer. This mental noise creates tension in their muscles, clouds their strategic thinking, and causes them to play not to lose rather than to win. In contrast, the player who has mastered this Stoic mindset is having a completely different experience. Their entire reality is narrowed to the current point. They are focused only on their footwork, reading their opponent's serve, and executing their shot with perfect form. They are detached from the final score, not because they don't care, but because they understand that the only way to influence that score is to be fully present for each individual shot. The outcome is a byproduct of their process. This total absorption in the effort is what athletes call being in the zone, a state of peak presence and performance that is only accessible when the weight of the result is lifted from their shoulders. Now translate this from the court to your own daily life. Where is your attachment to a specific outcome creating a layer of static anxiety that muffles your engagement? Perhaps it's in your career, where you're so focused on the goal of a promotion that you've stopped deriving any joy from the actual work you do each day. The work becomes a mere means to an end, a stressful grind, and your conversations with superiors become calculated performances rather than genuine collaborations. Or maybe it's in your social life, where you're so attached to a new person liking you that you can't relax and be yourself on a date. You're mentally rehearsing what to say next instead of listening, and your authenticity is buried under a pile of desired impressions. In both cases, the fixation on the result is actively undermining the very effort required to achieve it. Take a moment to identify one specific area where this dynamic plays out for you. Is it a project at work, a creative pursuit, or a personal relationship? Once you've identified it, make a conscious practice of redirecting your mental energy. Before you engage in that activity, remind yourself, my only job is to focus on the quality of my effort right now. The outcome is not mine to control. This simple preemptive reframe can liberate you from the burden of expectation, allowing your full presence and capability to shine through, unhindered by fear. Most people enter a conversation with a hidden agenda. Their mind is already busy crafting a response, preparing a counter-argument, or waiting for the slightest pause to insert their own story. This is listening to reply. It's a transactional approach to communication where the other person is essentially a prompt for your own performance. But the most influential people operate from a completely different paradigm. They listen to understand. This shift from a focus on output to a focus on input is one of the most powerful yet understated applications of Stoic philosophy. It requires the humility to accept that you might not be the most important person in the conversation, and the discipline to fully quiet your own internal noise to make space for someone else's reality. Seneca, a master of the social arts in ancient Rome, saw this not as a passive skill but as an active virtue. He wrote in his letters, "Listen to many, speak to few." This wasn't advice toward isolation, it was a strategy for gathering wisdom. He understood that when you are truly listening, you are not just hearing words. You are learning about a person's character, their fears, their unspoken desires, and the logic behind their perspective. You are collecting data that is infinitely more valuable than anything you could say while your mind is preoccupied with itself. This practice of deep, attentive listening is a profound form of respect. In a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, the simple act of giving someone your complete and undivided attention is a rare gift. It signals that you value them and their thoughts enough to silence your own. From a Stoic perspective, this aligns perfectly with the focus on what is within our control. You cannot control what another person will say, but you can absolutely control how you receive it. You can choose to offer them the sanctuary of your full presence. This has a transformative effect on the dynamics of any interaction. The person speaking feels seen and validated, which lowers their defenses and opens them up to genuine connection. They are more likely to trust you, to be honest with you, and to value your opinion in return because you have first demonstrated that you value theirs. Your influence grows not through forceful expression, but through receptive understanding. You become a person others seek out, not because you always have the right answers, but because you make them feel heard. Imagine a leader in a tense organizational meeting. Morale is low, and a team member is voicing a criticism about a new policy. The easy, ego-driven response is to immediately defend the policy, explain the reasoning behind it, and shut down the dissent. But a leader practicing Stoic listening would do the opposite. They would not interrupt, they would set aside their prepared defense and lean in. Their body language would be open, their eye contact steady. They would ask clarifying questions not to trap the speaker, but to truly grasp the root of their concern. Can you tell me more about how this is affecting your team's workflow? Or what part of this change feels the most disruptive to you? By doing this, the leader accomplishes several things at once. They mine for the real, often hidden, issue beneath the surface complaint. They make the employee feel respected, turning a potential adversary into a collaborator. and they gather crucial information that might actually improve the policy, making them a more effective leader. The trust built in that single conversation through the power of listening alone is worth more than a dozen charismatic speeches. This week, make it a personal experiment to practice this Stoic art. In your very next conversation, whether it's with a colleague, a family member, or a cashier, make a conscious decision to shift your goal. Your goal is not to be interesting, but to be interested. When the other person is speaking, notice when your mind leaps ahead to formulate your response. Gently guide it back to their words. Listen for the emotion behind their statements. Notice their body language. Resist the urge to one-up their story with one of your own. Simply be a blank page, ready to receive what they are sharing. Afterward, take a moment to reflect. How did that feel? Was it difficult? How did the other person respond? You may find that the conversation felt slower but richer. You may discover you learned something surprising, and you will likely notice that the other person seemed more engaged with you by the end. This is the quiet, transformative power of full attention. It forges connections that talking never could. Clutter in speech almost always points to clutter in the mind. When our thoughts are disorganized, anxious, or unfocused, our words tend to spill out in a jumble of half-formed ideas, unnecessary qualifiers, and repetitive phrases. We talk in circles, hoping to eventually land on a point, and in doing so, we drain our presence of all its power. The Stoics saw this not as a minor social faux pas, but as a fundamental failure of self-discipline and rational clarity. They believed that our speech should be a direct reflection of a well-ordered mind, a mind that has done the hard work of thinking before it speaks. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, placed immense importance on this, teaching that well-reasoned and concise speech was a core virtue. He famously argued that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak, but his deeper point was about the quality of that speech. For Zeno and the Stoics who followed him, every word should earn its place. If a word is not true, not kind, or not necessary, it has no business leaving your lips. This rigorous editing of your own expression is a profound act of self-respect and respect for your audience. It says, "I value your time and attention too much to waste it." This philosophy stands in stark contrast to the modern world's celebration of constant, often meaningless communication. We are encouraged to fill every silence, to have an opinion on everything instantly, and to broadcast our every thought. This noise isn't just external, it trains our minds to operate on the surface, prioritizing speed and volume over depth and value. Stoic speech is the antidote. It is the practice of moving from reactive commentary to thoughtful contribution. It requires the courage to sometimes remain silent until you have something meaningful to say, and the humility to realize that not every situation requires your verbal input. This isn't about being terse or uncommunicative. It's about ensuring that when you do choose to contribute, your words carry significant weight because they are precise, purposeful, and grounded in reason. Your presence becomes more authoritative because people learn that your speech is not a stream of consciousness, but a filtered and valuable output. Imagine 2 different approaches to the same high-stakes meeting. The first person, unprepared and anxious, begins to speak. Their contribution is a winding road of filler words and hedging phrases. "So, I was just thinking, and I'm not sure if this is exactly right, but maybe we could potentially look into the possibility of shifting our paradigm," or something along those lines, you know. The sentence is so burdened with escape hatches and vague language that any potential insight is completely lost. The listener's attention wanders, and the speaker's credibility diminishes with every unnecessary syllable. Now picture the Stoic alternative. This person has spent a few moments in silence, organizing their thoughts. They lean forward slightly and say, "I propose we focus our efforts on the Eastern market." The data shows higher demand and lower competition there. The statement is clear, concise, and direct. It is a fully formed thought delivered with confidence. It doesn't need to hide behind jargon or qualifiers because it stands on its own merit. The difference in impact is astronomical. The second speaker commands the room's attention not by being the loudest, but by being the clearest. This week, embrace a small but powerful practice in the spirit of Zeno. Choose just one filler word to eliminate from your vocabulary. It might be or ah, the classic verbal pauses that betray a racing mind searching for its next thought. Perhaps it's a hedging phrase like, "I'm no expert, but," or "this might be a stupid question," which immediately undermine your authority before you've even stated your idea. It could even be the overuse of "like" or "you know," which dilute the potency of your statements. Your challenge is not to achieve perfect robotic speech, but to cultivate a heightened awareness of these verbal crutches. Before you speak, take that stoic pause, just a half second, to gather your thought. That tiny moment of silence is far more powerful than any filler word. It conveys thoughtfulness and composure. By surgically removing just one of these habits, you initiate a cascade of improvement. Your mind, forced to operate without its familiar crutch, will naturally begin to think with more clarity and intention. Your words will become more purposeful, and your presence will grow stronger with every clear, unambiguous sentence you speak. The wisest people in any room are often the quickest to admit what they don't know. This might seem counterintuitive in a world that often rewards supreme confidence and unshakable certainty, but it is one of the most powerful secrets to genuine influence. True expertise isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the wisdom to understand the limits of your knowledge and the courage to be transparent about them. This is Stoic humility in action, and it is a magnet for trust and respect. It creates a presence that is approachable, authentic, and deeply compelling because it is rooted in reality rather than ego. When you openly acknowledge the boundaries of your understanding, you don't diminish your authority, you strengthen it. You signal that your primary commitment is to the truth, not to protecting your own image. This profound idea has its roots in the very origins of Stoic thought, which was heavily influenced by the example of Socrates. Socrates famously declared that his only real wisdom was in knowing that he knew nothing. This wasn't a clever rhetorical trick or false modesty. It was the core of his philosophical method. He understood that the moment you believe you have nothing left to learn is the moment you stop growing. The Stoics, particularly Epictetus, embraced this Socratic spirit wholeheartedly. Epictetus, teaching his students how to live a life of virtue and reason, placed immense value on this intellectual humility. He offered a simple but challenging directive. If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." This is more than just a lesson in handling criticism. It's a masterclass in self-awareness. It urges us to recognize that our perspective is always incomplete. There is always more we could learn about a situation, and there are always flaws in our own understanding that we have yet to discover. To admit this is not a weakness, it is the foundation of strength and continuous learning. We can see the power of this principle in the modern world, even in fields built on definitive expertise. Imagine a highly respected surgeon leading a team through a complex and unexpected complication during a procedure. The easy, ego-driven path would be to plow forward with unwavering certainty, masking any doubt and insisting on their initial plan. But the surgeon who embodies Stoic humility takes a different route. They might pause and say to their team, "This isn't reacting as I anticipated. I want to hear your observations. What are we missing? By openly admitting the uncertainty of the moment, this surgeon does not lose the team's respect, they galvanize it. They unlock the collective intelligence in the room, creating an environment where everyone feels safe to contribute their observations. This drastically increases the chances of a successful outcome. Furthermore, it demonstrates a leadership style that is confident enough to be vulnerable, a combination that builds profound loyalty and trust. The team isn't following a title, they're following a human being who values the mission over their own pride. Now turn this lens inward on your own life. Consider an area where you are considered knowledgeable or where you are expected to be the expert, perhaps your professional field, a role you hold in your community, or even within your family dynamic. In that realm, is there a subtle pressure you feel to always have the right answer, to never appear unsure? How does that pressure shape your interactions? Does it sometimes cause you to speak with more certainty than you genuinely feel, or to dismiss questions that challenge your view? Think about a recent conversation where you felt that instinct to defend your position rather than explore a new perspective. What would it have looked like to instead lead with humble curiosity? To say, "That's an interesting point I hadn't considered. Can you tell me more?" Or, "I'm not entirely sure about that. Let me look into it and get back to you." This kind of disarming honesty doesn't reduce your stature. It transforms you from a mere authority figure into a true collaborator and learner. It opens doors to deeper connections and more effective solutions, proving that the most influential presence is often the one secure enough to say, "I don't know." Your body language often speaks long before you ever utter a word, setting the stage for how others perceive your confidence and composure. The Stoics understood this intimate connection between the physical and the mental better than most, viewing the body not as a separate entity but as the visible instrument of the soul. They believed that cultivating a calm, dignified external presence was a direct reflection of, and even a reinforcement to, a disciplined inner world. The philosopher Musonius Rufus, a major Stoic teacher, was particularly adamant about this. He taught that philosophy was not merely an abstract intellectual exercise but a practical training of both mind and body. He argued that just as an archer must train his arms to draw the bow steadily, a person seeking virtue must train their body to endure hardship without complaint and to carry itself with resilience and grace. For the Stoics, this wasn't about vanity or presenting a false image. It was about alignment. A chaotic, slouched, or frantic physical bearing betrays a chaotic inner state, while a calm and collected demeanor broadcasts a mind that is ordered and in control. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of this duty to maintain poise, especially under the incredible weight of leading an empire. In his private meditations, he wrote, "Let every impulse and every action be done as one who is leaving life behind." This is not a morbid thought, it is a call to ultimate presence and dignity. He is urging himself to act in every single moment as if it were his last opportunity to act with virtue and integrity, which includes how he carries himself physically. To bear oneself with dignity is to show respect for yourself, for the people you are with, and for the situation you are in. It is a non-verbal declaration that you are fully engaged and worthy of being taken seriously. This physical poise becomes a powerful feedback loop. By consciously adopting a posture of calm strength, you actually begin to feel more calm and strong. Your physiology informs your psychology, slowing your heart rate, deepening your breath, and quieting the frantic chatter of anxiety. Consider the palpable difference in a high-stakes situation, like a critical negotiation or a difficult performance review. One person walks into the room with hunched shoulders, a downward gaze, and fidgeting hands. They might be brilliantly prepared, but their physical presentation immediately telegraphs uncertainty and nervousness, undermining their credibility before they even speak. Their counterpart, however, enters the same room. They move with deliberate, unhurried motions. They sit upright but not rigidly. Their gestures are measured and purposeful, and they maintain steady, respectful eye contact. This person is practicing Stoic poise. Their physical composure does two things simultaneously. It projects an aura of unshakable capability to everyone else in the room, and it internally regulates their own nervous system, preventing adrenaline from hijacking their rational mind. They are using their body as a tool to create the very presence they wish to embody. In such a scenario, the outcome often hinges less on the specific arguments made and more on the perceived authority and calm of the person making them. Poise is persuasive. Now bring this awareness to your own life. Over the next 24 hours, make it a point to simply notice your physical habits, especially in moments of minor stress or frustration. What does your body do when you're stuck in traffic? Do you grip the steering wheel tightly, clench your jaw, and slump in your seat? What happens during a tense work call when you're on mute? Do you find yourself pacing erratically, rubbing your forehead anxiously, or slouching deeply into your chair? These are not just insignificant tics, they are the physical manifestations of your internal state, and they actively reinforce feelings of helplessness and agitation. The Stoic adjustment is not to suppress these feelings, but to consciously choose a different physical expression. When you feel that stress response building, take a single Stoic action. Straighten your spine, drop your shoulders away from your ears, plant your feet firmly on the floor, and take one deep, slow breath. This isn't about pretending, it's about intervening in the feedback loop between your mind and your body. By choosing poise in your posture, you are actively cultivating the inner resilience that defines true Stoic strength. There is a world of difference between reacting and responding, a gap that separates those who are ruled by circumstance from those who command their own presence. A reaction is instant, raw, and often defensive, a lightning-fast surge of emotion that bypasses your better judgment entirely. A response, however, is something entirely different. It is considered deliberate and chosen. It emerges from the space between a triggering event and your answer to it. This critical space is where your power truly resides, and the Stoics called this practice the discipline of assent. The power to pause and choose whether to agree with your initial, impulsive impression. Seneca, who wrote extensively on managing anger and emotional turmoil, perfectly captured the immense power found in this tiny delay. He advised, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." His instruction was simple yet profound. Do not allow yourself to be carried away by the first flash of feeling. Force yourself to wait. In that waiting, you reclaim your autonomy from the temporary tyranny of emotion. This Stoic pause is not a passive act of suppression. It is an active, strategic withdrawal into your own rational faculty. When an event occurs, a critical comment, a sudden setback, a perceived insult, your mind immediately forms an initial impression. This impression is automatic. You cannot stop it from arising. The untrained mind immediately seizes upon this impression, accepts it as absolute truth, and unleashes a reaction based on it. The Stoic mind, however, inserts a moment of inquiry. It steps back from the impression and holds it at arm's length for examination. Is this impression accurate? Is it helpful? Is it within my control? By asking these simple questions, you break the chain of stimulus and response. You transition from being a puppet of your emotions to the author of your actions. This pause might last only a second or two, but that is all the time your reason needs to intervene and choose a wiser path. Your presence in that moment transforms from reactive to authoritative, because you are demonstrating that you are governed by principle, not by impulse. Imagine a common workplace scenario that puts this law to the test. A manager has just spent hours meticulously preparing an important presentation for leadership. During the meeting, a colleague publicly challenges a core assumption of the proposal, calling it unrealistic and poorly researched. The initial visceral reaction is one of humiliation and anger. The body flushes with heat, the heart pounds, and the mind scrambles to launch a counterattack. A reactive manager operating on this raw emotion might immediately snap back with a defensive retort, perhaps attacking the colleague's own work or digging in their heels on the disputed point. This meeting now descends into a public battle of egos, damaging professional relationships and undermining the manager's credibility as a calm and capable leader. Now envision the alternative response. The same trigger occurs. The manager feels the exact same surge of heat and embarrassment, but they have practiced the Stoic pause. They take a slow, deliberate breath, a physical act that creates mental space. In that space, reason offers a different path. This isn't a personal attack, it's a challenge to an idea. The goal is not to win an argument, but to arrive at the best outcome for the project. Instead of reacting defensively, the manager responds with measured curiosity. "Thank you for raising that concern," they might say. "Can you help me understand which specific data points feel unrealistic to you? I'd appreciate your perspective so we can strengthen the proposal together." This response completely reframes the interaction. It de-escalates tension, demonstrates confident leadership, and turns a critic into a potential collaborator. The manager's authority isn't diminished, it is magnified because they remain the calm, rational center of the storm. Now turn this lens inward onto your own life. Can you identify a familiar trigger that reliably provokes a reactive rather than a responsive state? Perhaps it's a certain tone of voice your partner uses, a particular type of critical feedback at work, or the feeling of being cut off in traffic. These triggers are your training ground. Think about the last time this happened. What was the immediate story your mind told itself? Did it scream, "This is unfair"? Or, "They are disrespecting me"? That initial narrative is the impression you must learn to catch. Your practice begins not in the heat of the moment, but right now, in a moment of calm. Choose one specific trigger and mentally rehearse a different outcome. Plan your Stoic response in advance. If the trigger is your partner's tone, your planned response could be to take one deep breath and say, "It feels like we're both getting frustrated. Can we pause for a minute and then try again?" By pre-scripting a rational response, you are building a neural pathway that your brain can access even when emotions run high. You are not aiming for perfection, but for progress, for the ability to insert that life-changing pause between what happens to you and what you do next, transforming your presence from reactive to truly influential. Constant noise, whether from our devices, our environments, or even our own crowded schedules, has a way of drowning out our most valuable counsel, the quiet voice of our own inner wisdom. Solitude, in the Stoic sense, is the intentional practice of turning down that external volume to amplify that internal signal. It is not about loneliness or isolation, but about creating a sacred space for undistracted conversation with oneself. This is where presence is refined and clarity of thought is forged. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, despite the endless demands of leading an empire, understood that his most important meetings were the ones he held alone. He would retreat into his own mind, using solitude as a workshop for strengthening his resolve and examining his choices against the unwavering standard of virtue. His journal, a testament to this practice, is filled with insights born from these quiet moments. He wrote, "People look for retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, or in the mountains. But this is altogether unphilosophical when you can at any moment retreat into yourself, for nowhere can one find a more peaceful or less troubled retreat than in one's own soul. For Marcus and for the Stoics, the ultimate retreat was not a physical location but an internal state, a sanctuary of the mind that could be accessed anywhere, at any time, provided one had the discipline to seek it. This practice of strategic withdrawal is not an escape from responsibility. It is a necessary recalibration for effective engagement. Think of it as the sharpening of a blade. A warrior would not go into battle with a dull sword, and yet we constantly charge into our daily battles difficult conversations, complex decisions, creative challenges, with minds that are dulled by incessant input and fragmented attention. Solitude is the whetstone. It is the time we take to sharpen our focus, hone our judgment, and reaffirm our purpose. In the silence, we can sort through the clutter of impressions and reactions from the day, separating what was within our control from what was not, and preparing ourselves to face the next challenge with renewed perspective and calm. This is how solitude directly fuels a more powerful presence. When you return from this retreat into yourself, you are not withdrawing from the world. You are re-entering it with a clearer mind and a steadier hand, making you far more capable of genuine influence. We see this principle embraced by some of the most effective modern leaders, though they might not call it Stoicism. Bill Gates was famous for his Think Weeks, where he would literally isolate himself in a secluded cabin with stacks of books and research papers, allowing for deep, uninterrupted thought that shaped the future of Microsoft. Many high-performing executives now deliberately schedule focus blocks or quiet hours in their calendars, recognizing that their most valuable strategic thinking cannot happen amidst the ping of emails and the pressure of back-to-back meetings. This isn't just a productivity hack, it is a practical application of an ancient truth. The quality of our output in the world is directly dependent on the quality of our input and processing within ourselves. Without the space to reflect, we are merely reacting to the latest stimulus, forever caught in a loop of responses rather than acting with intention. Your own life may feel too crowded, too noisy, too demanding to even imagine finding a moment of true solitude. The barrier is not a lack of time, but a perception that solitude must be a grand, hour-long event. The Stoic practice meets us where we are. You do not need a week in a cabin. You can begin with just 5 minutes. The challenge is to make it intentional. This means it is not merely a quiet moment scrolling through a phone, which is just another form of input. It is 5 minutes of sitting with your own thoughts, perhaps with a journal, or simply gazing out a window. It is a conscious disconnection from the external world to reconnect with your inner one. Before your day gets swept away in its usual current, could you wake up 5 minutes earlier and spend that time in quiet reflection? Or could you sit in your car for 5 minutes after arriving home, creating a buffer between the demands of work and the warmth of family? In that small space, ask yourself simple Stoic questions. What is one thing I did well yesterday? What is one thing I could improve today? What am I truly in control of right now? This tiny daily investment compounds into a significant wealth of self-awareness and mental clarity, ensuring you move through your world not as an echo of its noise, but as a source of your own calm and considered thought. When did you last pause, not to think about what you're missing or what's next on your list, but to genuinely appreciate what you already have, right here in this moment? In the relentless pursuit of more achievement, more possessions, more status, we often overlook the profound power of simply acknowledging the good that is already present in our lives. The Stoics elevated this simple acknowledgement into a disciplined practice, a form of mental training they saw as essential for cultivating a contented and influential presence. They understood that gratitude isn't merely a polite sentiment or a seasonal ritual. It is a radical act of shifting your focus from what you lack to what you possess, thereby grounding yourself firmly in reality and freeing your mind from the restless anxiety of endless wanting. This shift doesn't happen by accident. It is a conscious choice, a deliberate exercise in recasting your perception of the world around you. This Stoic form of gratitude is far more robust than the common conception of feeling thankful when things go well. It is about finding a point of appreciation even and especially when circumstances are difficult. Epictetus, who knew immense hardship from his years in slavery, framed this with his characteristic stark wisdom. He advised, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." But he took it a step further, teaching his students to be thankful not just for their blessings but for their challenges. He suggested that we should be grateful for obstacles and difficult people because they provide the necessary friction against which we can sharpen our virtues. They are the training weights for our character, without which our patience, courage, and resilience would never grow strong. This perspective transforms gratitude from a passive feeling into an active tool for empowerment. By being thankful for the challenge itself, you reframe it from a hostile force opposing you into a valuable partner in your own development. We can see the tangible impact of this practice not just in individual lives, but in the dynamics of groups and teams. Consider a workplace team facing a daunting deadline or a significant setback. The natural, untrained reaction is to focus on the stress, the pressure, the potential for failure. This collective anxiety creates a tense, fragmented atmosphere where people become defensive. Communication breaks down and morale plummets. Now, imagine a leader who introduces a stoic moment of gratitude into that same high-pressure environment. At the start of a tense meeting, they might begin not by diving into the problems, but by saying, "Before we address the challenges, I want us each to share one thing we're grateful for about this project or about working with this team." It might be gratitude for a colleague's support, for the learning opportunity the problem presents, or simply for having a job that provides meaningful work. This simple 60-second exercise works a subtle magic. It forcibly redirects the collective focus from what is going wrong to what is still fundamentally right. It reminds everyone of their shared purpose and connection. This doesn't erase the problems, but it ensures the team approaches them from a foundation of abundance and collaboration rather than scarcity and fear. The cohesion and morale that result from this grounded gratitude make the team not only happier but also more resilient and effective. This practice begins with the smallest of recognitions. It doesn't require a major life victory or a windfall. The Stoics would argue that the most powerful gratitude is often found in the most ordinary aspects of existence: the warmth of the sun, a cool glass of water, the ability to draw a full breath, the comfort of a safe place to sleep. These are things we overlook 1,000 times a day, yet they form the very bedrock of our well-being. To notice them is to anchor yourself in the present reality of sufficiency, creating a buffer against the psychological pull of lack and desire. So take a moment right now, in the middle of your day, to bring this ancient discipline to life. Pause the video if you need to. In your mind, or even better, with a pen and paper, list 3 specific things you are grateful for in this exact moment. They can be as seemingly insignificant as the comfortable chair you're sitting in, the taste of your morning coffee, or the fact that you have 20 minutes to invest in your own growth. The size of the item doesn't matter, the act of consciously identifying it does. This is not about manufacturing positivity. It is about training your attention to notice the good that is already woven into the fabric of your life, building a presence that is grounded, content, and irresistibly influential because it is rooted in what is real and what is truly valuable. Rigidity might offer a temporary sense of control, but under the relentless pressure of life, it is always the first thing to shatter. True strength, and the unshakable presence that comes with it, is not found in stubborn resistance but in graceful, resilient adaptability. This is the mark of someone who understands how to move with the currents of change rather than exhausting themselves fighting against them. The Stoics gave this concept a beautiful and profound name, amor fati, a love of one's fate. This is not a passive resignation or a shrug of indifference. It is an active, wholehearted embrace of everything life brings, the smooth and the rough, not as random misfortunes but as necessary material for the building of your character. To love your fate is to see every event, without exception, as an opportunity to practice virtue, to learn, and to grow stronger. It is the ultimate declaration that you trust in your own capacity to handle whatever comes your way. This philosophy is rooted in a clear-eyed view of the fundamental nature of reality. The Stoics observed that the entire universe is in a constant, flowing state of change. To demand that life stand still for our comfort is not just futile, it is to live in a state of perpetual conflict with reality itself. Marcus Aurelius, who faced endless political upheavals, betrayals, and wars during his reign, constantly meditated on this truth to maintain his equilibrium. He wrote in his private journal, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." This simple statement contains two powerful layers of wisdom. First, it is a stark reminder that change is not an anomaly, it is the only constant. The second part reveals our power. While we cannot stop the river of change, we have absolute authority over how we choose to think about it. Our life, our experience of reality, is indeed what our thoughts make it. We can think of change as a terrifying threat, or we can choose to see it as the very substance of life itself. Consider a modern business leader navigating a sudden and severe market disruption, perhaps a groundbreaking new technology that renders their flagship product obsolete almost overnight. The rigid leader, clinging to the way things were, responds with denial and panic. They might pour resources into defending the old model, blaming external factors, and desperately trying to resurrect a past that is already gone. This approach drains morale, wastes capital, and ultimately leads the company into irrelevance. Their presence becomes one of fear and instability. Now, imagine a leader who has internalized the Stoic principle of amor fati. They see the same disruption. They acknowledge the real threat and the potential for loss, but their primary thought is not, "This shouldn't be happening." It is, "This is happening. This is now the reality I must work with. How can I use this?" They embrace this new fate with a sense of purposeful curiosity. They pivot the company's resources toward innovation, viewing the disruption not as a tombstone for their old business, but as a birth certificate for a new one. They communicate with transparent honesty about the challenges while radiating unwavering confidence in the team's ability to adapt. This leader's presence becomes a magnet for trust and loyalty because they are not fighting the wave, they are learning to surf it, demonstrating a resilience that inspires everyone around them to do the same. Now turn this powerful lens onto your own life. What is the one change you find yourself consistently resisting? It might not be a market-shattering event. Often, the changes we resist most stubbornly are the subtle, persistent ones. Perhaps it's a shift in your family dynamics, a new policy at work that feels inconvenient, or even the gradual process of aging itself. We dig in our heels, complaining that it isn't fair or that it shouldn't be this way, and in doing so, we pour our precious energy into a battle we cannot win. The Stoic practice of adaptation asks you to consciously identify that point of resistance, and then to apply the discipline of amor fati. Take a moment to clearly name the change you are fighting. Now, instead of listing all the reasons why it's bad or unfair, ask yourself a different set of questions. What might this change be trying to teach me? How could adapting to this actually make me stronger or more skilled? If I were to not just accept but fully embrace this reality, what new possibilities might open up? By shifting your internal dialogue from resistance to curiosity, you perform a profound alchemy. You transform the change from an enemy outside your gates into a teacher who has arrived at your door, offering you the exact lessons you need to develop a more resilient and influential presence. Presence isn't about saying more, it's about meaning more with less. In a world saturated with constant communication, where every notification and message competes for a sliver of attention, the ability to distill your thoughts into their purest, most potent form is a superpower. This is the essence of Stoic minimalism in communication, a disciplined economy of words where every syllable must earn its place, ensuring that what you say lands with unmistakable weight and crystal clarity. The Stoics saw verbose, unnecessary speech not merely as a social misstep, but as a form of intellectual and moral laziness. It clouds your intent, dilutes your authority, and shows a lack of respect for your own thoughts and for the time of your listener. To speak with precision is to honor the truth. To ramble is to obscure it. Seneca, a master of the written word, was particularly scornful of long-windedness that served no purpose other than to hear itself talk. He saw it as a sign of a disordered mind, writing in one of his letters, "Speak concisely, say much in few words." This wasn't a suggestion for shyness, but a command for impact. He advised avoiding the speaker, who plies a feeble and twittering tongue, who delights in words and multiplies them. For Seneca, the goal was never to fill the air, but to illuminate it. Superfluous speech, in the Stoic view, is a drain on your vital energy and a fracture in your focus. Every unnecessary word is a tiny departure from your integrity, a small compromise where you choose showing off over showing up. Minimalist communication, in contrast, is an act of focus and respect. It forces you to do the hard work of thinking before you speak, of refining a complex idea into its simplest, most powerful expression. This clarity of speech becomes a direct reflection of clarity of mind, broadcasting a presence that is both formidable and trustworthy because it has nothing to hide behind. Consider the stark contrast between two approaches to a common professional task: a request for resources sent via email. The first version is a classic example of what not to do. It's laden with corporate jargon, hedging language, and a meandering preamble that obscures the actual ask. "Hello team, hope you're having a productive week. I'm reaching out today because I wanted to touch base regarding the ongoing project deliverables for Q4. After conducting a preliminary review and syncing with stakeholders, it has come to my attention that we might potentially benefit from an additional allocation of bandwidth to ensure we're positioned for optimal outcomes. Would it be possible to perhaps explore this further in our next sync? The core request is buried under an avalanche of vague phrases like touch base. It has come to my attention and potentially benefit." The reader is left to decode the message, and the sender's presence is weakened by a lack of conviction and directness. Now, read the Stoic minimalist alternative. "Team, to hit our Q4 project goals, I need approval for one additional developer for 2 weeks. This will ensure we deliver on time. I've attached the data supporting this need. Can we discuss in tomorrow's meeting?" This message is a surgical strike. It states the what, the why, and the next step with ruthless efficiency. There is no room for misinterpretation. The sender's presence is immediately felt as competent, prepared, and respectful of everyone's time. The difference in results is profound. The first email will likely generate a chain of clarifying questions and delays. The second email will get a direct yes or no, moving the issue toward immediate resolution. The power isn't in the volume of words, but in the value of each one chosen. This week, embrace this discipline as a personal challenge. Before you send your next important email, draft a presentation, or even have a crucial conversation, make it your goal to simplify your message by 50%. This doesn't mean just cutting words arbitrarily. It means engaging in a rigorous editing process of your own thoughts. Ask yourself with each sentence, what is the core idea I am trying to convey? Is this adjective necessary? Does this example truly illuminate the point, or is it a distraction? Can I say this more directly? This practice is deceptively difficult. It requires you to confront the ambiguity in your own thinking and refine it into something sharp and clear. The effort, however, pays a massive dividend in presence. When you consistently communicate with this level of precision, people learn to lean in when you speak, knowing that your words will be few, but everyone will count. Actions imprint themselves on the world far more deeply than words ever could. You can deliver the most eloquent lecture on integrity, but if your own behavior shows even a hint of deceit, your words become meaningless noise. The Stoics understood that genuine influence doesn't radiate from what you say, but from who you are when you think no one is watching. This is the essence of leading by example, the 16th unwritten law of presence. It is the quiet, consistent demonstration of your values through your everyday conduct, making your philosophy visible and tangible to everyone around you. This form of leadership requires no title or authority. It is available to anyone willing to align their actions with their principles, creating a gravitational pull that naturally inspires others to rise to a higher standard. This concept is the very bedrock of Stoic practice. For the Stoics, philosophy was never meant to be a purely academic exercise or a set of clever arguments to be debated. It was a practical guide for living, a manual for virtue that had to be embodied to have any real meaning. Epictetus, who taught from a position of profound personal freedom despite his former status as a slave, drove this point home with characteristic force. He instructed his students, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Don't be concerned with the outward appearance of wisdom, but with the reality of it. He was urging them to stop performing wisdom for an audience and to start living it in the choices only they would see. He continued, set an example in your own conduct. Don't waste time arguing about what a good person should be one. This is the ultimate distillation of the idea. Endless discussion about virtue is a distraction from the real work, which is the relentless, often unseen effort to be virtuous. Your example, your conduct, becomes your most powerful and authentic sermon. We can see this principle at work in the most fundamental unit of society, the family. Consider a parent who is constantly telling their child to be patient. They might say, "You need to learn to wait your turn," or "Stop interrupting, it's rude." But if that same parent consistently reacts with sighs of frustration in traffic, snaps at customer service representatives on the phone, or multitasks on their device while the child is trying to tell them a story, their instructions on patience become hollow. The child's mind is not absorbing the words, it is absorbing the modeled behavior. The real lesson being taught is that impatience is the acceptable response to minor inconveniences. Now imagine the alternative. The parent who wishes to teach patience makes a conscious effort to demonstrate it. When stuck in traffic, they might take a deep breath and say aloud, "Well, this is a good chance to listen to the rest of this song." When put on hold during a call, they use the time to read a book rather than mutter complaints. When the child interrupts, they gently finish their own thought before turning and giving them their full attention. They are not telling the child how to be patient. They are showing them, moment by moment, what patience looks like in practice. This lived example is a language far more persuasive than any lecture, silently imprinting a behavioral blueprint that the child will carry for life. This dynamic extends far beyond the home into every sphere of influence. A manager who preaches teamwork but consistently takes credit for their team's ideas teaches cynicism, not collaboration. A friend who advocates for honesty but frequently cancels plans with flimsy excuses teaches that words are cheap. In contrast, the simple, unheralded act of following through on a promise, of admitting a mistake openly, or of offering help without being asked, these are the actions that build a reputation of unwavering integrity. Your presence gains a unique quality of trustworthiness because people have learned that your behavior is a perfect mirror of your beliefs. There is no gap between what you say and what you do, and that consistency is the most compelling form of leadership there is. Take a moment now to turn this lens inward with honest and gentle curiosity. Is there a value or a principle that you find yourself advocating for to others, perhaps integrity, courage, compassion, or discipline, that your own actions don't fully embody? We all have these gaps. They are part of the human journey. The practice here is not to judge yourself for it, but to simply bring it into the light of your awareness. Maybe you encourage your team to maintain a healthy work-life balance, but you yourself are always the last one to leave the office and answer emails at all hours. Perhaps you talk about the importance of kindness, but you consistently gossip about a difficult colleague. Identify just one of these disconnects. The goal isn't an immediate and perfect overhaul, but a single, small step toward alignment. Could you leave work on time just one day this week without a guilty explanation? Could you bite your tongue the next time a piece of gossip is about to be shared? This is how you start to lead by example, not through a grand, sweeping gesture, but through the quiet integrity of a single action that finally matches your words. Are you making a difference or just making a point? This simple but piercing question cuts to the heart of a profound shift in motivation that separates a performance of presence from the real thing. So much of our energy is spent crafting an image, building a personal brand, and seeking recognition for our efforts. We chase likes, titles, and public praise, believing that these external validations are the markers of a life well lived. But the Stoics identified a fatal flaw in this pursuit. When your primary goal is recognition, you hand over the keys to your happiness and self-worth to the unpredictable and often fickle opinions of others. You become a slave to applause, constantly anxious that it might stop. True, unshakable presence, they argued, is only found when you redirect that energy from seeking recognition to making a genuine contribution. Your focus shifts from "how do I look" to "what good can I do?" This transforms your entire orientation to the world from one of lack to one of abundance. Marcus Aurelius, a man who arguably had more access to fame and power than almost anyone in the ancient world, constantly drilled this principle into his own mind. He understood the seductive pull of ego and the emptiness that follows when you feed it. In his private meditations, he wrote, "When you have done a good act, what more do you want? Do you want a reward for it, as if the eye should claim a reward for seeing or the feet for walking? This is the essence of Stoic contribution. The eye sees because that is its nature, it is fulfilling its purpose. The feet walk for the same reason. For a human being whose nature is rational and social, doing good is its own reward because it is the fulfillment of our purpose. To act justly, to help others, to contribute to the common good, these are not transactions where we perform a service and wait for payment in the currency of praise. They are expressions of our deepest humanity. The joy is found in the act itself, in the quiet satisfaction of knowing you have played your part in the vast, interconnected web of human society. This internal fulfillment generates a presence that is calm, grounded, and free from the desperate need for external approval. You are no longer performing, you are simply being useful. We see this principle embodied not just in ancient texts but in the most respected figures of our own time. Consider the countless researchers, teachers, and healthcare workers who spend decades in relative obscurity, driven not by the dream of a trophy or a viral headline, but by the quiet conviction that their work matters. Their influence is immense, but it is built on a foundation of genuine service. Or think of a community leader who organizes a neighborhood clean-up not to get their name in the paper, but because they want their children to play in a beautiful park. Their motivation is the betterment of their community, and the respect they earn is a natural byproduct of that commitment, not its primary goal. This is the subtle but crucial difference. The person motivated by recognition will often lose steam if their efforts go unnoticed. Their work is conditional. The person motivated by contribution will persist regardless because the work itself is the reward. Their presence carries a weight of authenticity that no amount of self-promotion can ever manufacture. Now, bring this concept into the sharp focus of your own daily life. It's in the smallest choices where this law truly lives or dies. It's the difference between offering to help a colleague with a difficult project because you genuinely want them to succeed, versus offering help because you want the manager to see you being a team player. It's the difference between sharing a piece of valuable knowledge online to educate others, versus sharing it to be seen as the smartest person in the room. The action might look identical to an outside observer, but the internal motivation, whether it springs from ego or from a spirit of service, radiates outward and fundamentally alters the quality of your presence. One feels generous and secure, the other can feel calculated and hungry. This week, make it a practice to identify one specific opportunity to contribute without any expectation of reward or recognition. It doesn't have to be a grand, sweeping gesture. In fact, it's often more powerful when it's small and unseen. Could you complete a tedious task that benefits your team without pointing out that you did it? Could you send a resource or a word of encouragement to someone who is struggling, with no need to ever mention it again? Could you offer genuine, specific praise to a friend or family member with no ulterior motive? The goal is to experience the intrinsic satisfaction that Marcus Aurelius described, the quiet joy of the eye that sees, simply because that is what it was made to do. In that shift from making a point to making a difference, you will find a deeper and far more sustainable source of influence. Every barrier you encounter, without a single exception, is a stepping stone in disguise for those who have learned to see the world through a Stoic lens. This isn't a naive optimism that pretends hardship doesn't hurt. It's a far more robust and powerful form of alchemy that transforms the very nature of a challenge right before your eyes. The Stoics called this paratrope the art of turning something upside down or inside out to reveal its hidden value. They practiced a mental flip where an obstacle ceased to be a roadblock and instead became the raw material for building a stronger, wiser, and more influential you. This radical reframing is perhaps one of the most empowering skills you can ever develop, because it means you are never truly at the mercy of your circumstances. Your power lies not in controlling what happens to you, but in commanding your interpretation of it. No one articulated this principle more famously than Marcus Aurelius, who faced down barbarian invasions, plague, and betrayal from within his own ranks. In the midst of this immense pressure, he penned a line that has become a cornerstone of Stoic thought. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Let's break down the sheer brilliance of that statement. He isn't saying the obstacle disappears or that it stops being difficult. He is declaring that the obstacle itself is now an integral part of the path forward. The very thing that seems to be blocking your progress is in fact the new territory you must master. If a wall appears in front of you, the way is no longer around it. The way is to learn how to climb, to tunnel, or to dismantle it brick by brick. The obstacle doesn't change, your relationship to it changes completely. It ceases to be your adversary and becomes your most demanding and effective teacher. We can witness this transformative mindset in the stories of countless modern entrepreneurs, where failure is not just common, but is often a prerequisite for eventual success. Imagine a founder who pours their heart and savings into launching a new tech product, only to see it completely flop in the marketplace. The initial reaction is one of crushing disappointment, a natural human response. The untrained mind might see this as a definitive verdict. I am a failure, my idea was bad, I should quit. This narrative leads to surrender, but an entrepreneur with a stoic mindset will, after acknowledging the pain, begin the work of paratrope. They will turn the obstacle upside down. The failure of the product is no longer a stop sign, it is a dataset. It is an incredibly expensive and painful round of market research that has now provided them with invaluable information. What specifically didn't resonate with customers? Was it the pricing, the user interface, or a feature that missed the mark? This obstacle, this failure, has just handed them the precise blueprint for what to build next. It has advanced the action by forcing a pivot that is now informed by real-world evidence rather than just theory. Some of the most iconic companies in the world were built on the ashes of a first, second, or even third failed attempt, because their founders possessed this alchemical ability to turn impediments into advantage. This practice extends far beyond business into the very fabric of our daily lives. A serious illness can be framed as an unbearable curse, or it can become the catalyst for a profound reevaluation of your health, your priorities, and your relationships, ultimately leading to a richer, more intentional life. A difficult, critical person in your office can be seen as a nuisance to be avoided, or they can be reframed as your personal trainer for patience, empathy, and assertive communication. The obstacle itself is neutral. Its value is determined solely by the story you choose to tell about it. The Stoic doesn't wish for a life without problems. They develop the skill set to use problems as the primary tool for their own development. Now bring this profound shift in perspective to a challenge you are facing right now. It might feel large and overwhelming, or it might be a persistent, nagging irritation. Take a moment to clearly name it. Now, instead of listing all the reasons why it's a problem, put on your Stoic lens and ask yourself a new set of questions. What is this obstacle forcing me to learn that I otherwise wouldn't? How is it strengthening a muscle I've neglected? In what way could this very difficulty be preparing me for a future I can't yet see? If I were to accept this not as a setback but as my current training ground, what would my first small action be? By engaging in this mental flip, you cease to be a victim of your circumstances and become the active architect of your response. Mastery and influence are marathons, not sprints. They are built not in a single explosive moment of effort, but in the quiet, often unnoticed accumulation of daily discipline. This understanding is at the heart of Stoic patience, a virtue that is far more active and strategic than simple waiting. It is the conscious, unwavering trust in the process of gradual growth, a trust that allows you to remain steadfast even when immediate results are invisible. In a culture obsessed with overnight success and quick fixes, this long-view perspective is a superpower. It forges a presence that is not flustered by temporary setbacks or desperate for immediate validation, radiating a calm confidence that comes from knowing you are playing a different, deeper game entirely. Seneca, in his profound letters on the shortness of life, constantly lamented how we waste our years by failing to invest them wisely in sustained endeavors. He observed that people are often impatient with the very processes that lead to lasting achievement, writing, "Every great accomplishment is the result of a series of small things that are brought together." This is the essence of Stoic patience. It is the daily, brick-by-brick construction of your character and your capabilities. Seneca isn't advising passive waiting. He is championing persistent, directed action. The patience he describes is the discipline to show up every day and lay your brick perfectly, trusting that the wall will eventually rise, even if you cannot see its full height from where you stand today. This removes the anxiety of demanding immediate proof that your efforts are working. Your job is not to finish the wall today. Your job is to lay today's brick with excellence. The rest will follow in its own time. We see this unwavering, process-oriented patience embodied in the life of Cato the Younger, a Roman senator whose entire political career was a testament to the long game. Cato dedicated his life to the seemingly impossible cause of upholding republican virtue against the rising tide of corruption and dictatorship embodied by figures like Julius Caesar. For decades, he fought a losing battle. He was often outmaneuvered, mocked, and politically isolated. From a short-term perspective, his efforts could be seen as a series of failures. But Cato was not measuring his success in weekly or yearly political wins. He was measuring it by his unwavering fidelity to his principles. His presence in the Roman Senate was a constant, patient reminder of a standard that many had abandoned. His influence was not in his immediate political victories, but in the powerful example he set, an example that inspired others long after he was gone, and that cemented his legacy as a symbol of incorruptible integrity. His patience was not a weakness, it was the source of his immense moral authority, an authority that could only be built over a lifetime of consistent choice. Now, bring this ancient discipline into the context of your own modern ambitions. We all have goals that feel frustratingly slow to materialize. Perhaps you are working toward a promotion that seems perpetually out of reach, learning a complex new skill like a language or an instrument, or trying to build a healthier lifestyle. The natural impulse is to constantly look for signs of progress, to become discouraged when the scale doesn't move or when you still stumble over chord changes after weeks of practice. This is where Stoic patience intervenes. It asks you to shift your focus from the distant horizon, the ultimate goal, and back onto the quality of the single step you are taking right now. Are you practicing with full focus today? Are you making a healthy choice at this very meal? Are you contributing your best work on this single task? This is the only thing ever truly within your control. The final outcome is the sum of thousands of these present moment efforts. By trusting the process and divorcing your sense of worth from daily fluctuations, you build a resilient and steady presence that is not thrown off course by temporary delays. Identify one long-term aspiration in your own life where your patience is currently being tested. It might be a professional milestone, a creative project, or a personal relationship you are trying to deepen. Now, instead of fixating on the finish line, break it down into its smallest possible component parts. If your goal is to write a book, your patience is not demonstrated by obsessing over a published copy. It is built by faithfully writing 300 words today. If your goal is to get in shape, it is not about the number on the scale next month. It is about completing today's workout with intention. Make a conscious commitment to show up for that one small action, day after day, without requiring any external evidence that it is working. Your reward is not the result, but the integrity of the effort itself. This shift in focus is how you cultivate the Stoic patience that transforms not only your outcomes, but more importantly, the very character you bring to achieving them. The most influential people understand that the final and perhaps most transformative unwritten law is this: before you speak or act, you must consciously check your ego at the door. This is not about diminishing your self-worth. It is about recognizing that the unchecked ego is the single greatest obstacle to rational thought, genuine connection, and true presence. An inflated sense of self-importance acts like a distorting lens on reality, warping your perception of events and people to serve a narrative where you are always the hero, the victim, or the central figure. Stoicism teaches that this egoic filter is the primary enemy of clear thinking and effective engagement. It pulls you out of the present moment and into a fictionalized past or an imagined future where your status is constantly being negotiated and defended. To operate from this place is to forfeit your power because you are no longer responding to the world as it is, but to a story your ego is telling you about what you deserve, what you fear, and what you must protect. Epictetus, who dedicated his life to teaching the path to inner freedom, framed this danger with his typical piercing clarity. He warned, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." This simple statement exposes the core mechanism of the ego. It is a know-it-all. It creates a closed loop where new information that challenges its self-image is rejected, and feedback is perceived as a personal attack. The moment you believe you have nothing left to learn from a person or a situation, your ego has taken the wheel and your growth has stopped. Your presence becomes rigid and defensive because you are no longer engaged in a shared reality. You are defending a fortress of your own construction. Stoic humility, in contrast, is the courageous and ongoing practice of admitting the limits of your knowledge and the fallibility of your judgments. It is the open-handed stance of a perpetual student of life, which paradoxically is the only position from which you can ever truly lead or influence others. We can see the stark contrast between these two approaches in almost any domain of life. Consider two different leaders navigating a company-wide crisis. The first, led by ego, interprets the problem primarily as a threat to their personal authority and legacy. Their decisions are reactive and designed to shore up their image. They might blame external factors or specific team members in a public meeting, dismiss concerns as disloyalty, and plow forward with a rigid plan to prove their decisiveness. The team's morale plummets because they feel unseen and unsafe. Trust evaporates, and the leader's presence becomes a source of anxiety and resentment. Their influence crumbles because it was built on the fragile foundation of their own self-importance. Now envision the second leader. They enter the same crisis with a conscious humility. They begin by addressing the team and saying, "This is a challenging moment for all of us, and I don't have all the answers. I need your eyes and ears on this. What are you seeing that I might be missing?" This leader's ego is not in the driver's seat. Their commitment to the collective good is. They are secure enough to admit uncertainty and to actively seek out dissenting viewpoints. This does not make them look weak. It makes them look profoundly confident and trustworthy. Their presence becomes a magnet for collaboration and creative problem solving, and the respect they earn through this humility is the most durable influence imaginable. Now turn this revealing light onto a recent interaction in your own life. Cast your mind back over the past few days and find a moment, however small, where you felt a flicker of defensiveness, a need to be right, or a reluctance to admit a mistake. It might have been a minor disagreement with a partner where you clung to your point long after you knew it was trivial, or a work conversation where you felt your idea was overlooked and you spent the next hour mentally rehearsing your brilliance instead of listening. In that moment, your ego was present and your authentic presence was diminished. You were likely half listening, your inner dialogue consumed with crafting your defense or asserting your superiority. and the connection with the other person suffered for it. The practice now is not to judge yourself for that very human reaction, but to simply acknowledge it with clear-eyed honesty. What might that interaction have looked like if you had left your ego at the door? If you had approached it with the humility of not needing to win, but of seeking a shared understanding? This reflective act is the first and most important step in disarming the ego, creating space for a presence that is grounded not in self-importance, but in the quiet, powerful confidence that comes from having nothing left to prove. So we've journeyed through these 20 unwritten laws together, from mastering your inner dialogue to leaving ego at the door, and it's crucial to see them not as a random checklist but as a single, interconnected system. Each law supports and reinforces the others, creating a resilient architecture for a truly influential presence. Mastering your inner dialogue is what allows you to respond instead of react. Practicing intentional silence creates the space for deep listening. Cultivating emotional equanimity provides the stability needed to detach from outcomes. They are not 20 separate tasks, but 20 facets of the same gem, a life lived with Stoic intention. This holistic system is designed to work on you from the inside out, ensuring that the presence you project is not a performance, but an authentic reflection of a well-ordered mind. It's vital to remember that these are not life hacks or quick fixes you can master in a weekend. They are lifelong disciplines, a continuous practice of returning to your principles again and again. This is the heart of self-mastery. It's not a destination you arrive at, but a path you choose to walk every single day. Some days you will stumble, and that's not a sign of failure. It's an essential part of the training. The goal is progress, not perfection. It's about building the mental muscle and resilience to catch yourself more quickly, to pause a little sooner, and to choose a more virtuous response the next time. This journey is the real work, and it's this very work that forges the unshakable character capable of genuine magnetic influence. The Roman philosopher Seneca, with his profound understanding of the human condition, left us with a perfect summation of this entire inward journey. He wrote, "A man's true greatness lies in the consciousness of an honest purpose in life, founded on a just estimate of himself and everything else, and on a steady obedience to the rule of duty, regardless of the effects of things outside his control." Let that sink in. Your outward impact, your presence in the world, is defined by this inward journey, by your honest purpose, your just estimate of yourself, and your steady obedience to what you know is right. The influence follows. It is the natural outcome, not the primary goal. Your path forward from here doesn't require you to implement all 20 laws at once. That would be overwhelming and contrary to the Stoic focus on gradual, consistent effort. Instead, I want to invite you to choose just one. Scroll back through this video or through your own notes and let one law resonate with you. Perhaps it's the one you feel is your greatest challenge, or the one that sparked a moment of recognition. This week, make that single law your personal practice. If you choose Law 11, make it your mission to respond rather than react in every situation you can. If you choose Law 13, consciously list 3 things you're grateful for each morning. Carry this one intention with you for the next 7 days and observe what shifts, both within you and in your interactions with others, and I would truly love to hear about your experience. This isn't a solitary journey. In the comments below, share which law you've chosen to practice and what you're discovering. Your insights will undoubtedly inspire and encourage others in this community, creating a shared space for growth and learning. Your journey toward a more Stoic presence is just beginning, and if you found value in exploring these timeless principles with me, consider subscribing to this channel. We have so much more to explore together, from deeper dives into the texts of Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus to practical applications for modern life. Thank you for investing this time in your own growth. Go forth, practice your one law, and remember, the most powerful presence you can ever offer the world is simply your whole, authentic, and disciplined